Welcome back once again. This time, we will have the solution for the user-defined function using the syntax without return type and this time with passing parameter. Meaning, we need to put something inside the parentheses. Let's go back to the previous code that we have. So this is the previous solution that we have. So what we need to do for the solution number 2 is to check where to put the input, the process, and the output. So the syntax first for function without return type and without parameter list is, again, you need to use void on the left side because it says here without return type. And with parameter list, as I've said, you need to put something in here. So usually, the variable that we need to put inside the parameter is the input variable or the variable that needs to be passed from one function to another. So in this problem that we are solving right now, our input variable is the variable n1 and n2. Next thing that we need to identify is the placement of the input, process, and output. So input in this type of function declaration should be placed in main. Now the process and the output should stay inside the user-defined function. So let's have that. So again, the first thing that we need to do is to declare our function. So function declaration 2 without return type, so it will stay with void. Now, it will be highest. So we cannot use the same name. This time I will use highest 2. And then it should have something inside because it says with parameter. So as I've said, usually what you need to put inside the parameter is the input variable or the variable that needs to be passed from one function to another. So here, as the discussion earlier, your input should come from main. Therefore, from main, it should be passed going to the user-defined function. That's why we need to have the input as our parameter. So you need to identify again what is the data type, N2, and then put semicolon. And then in the function implementation, below the main or below the previous code that we have, so we should put this but with open and close parentheses. Again, in this type of solution, for case 2, input should be placed in main. So input should be placed there. And then the process and the output will stay in the user-defined function. Okay. So our input here is N1 and N2. So if your input is in main, do not forget to declare it in your declaration section in main. So this is N1 and this is N2. So I need to do that because we will have the input statement in main. So you need to declare those variable, or else there will be an error that would say that the variable that you use is not known in the scope of main. So input, first number, then cin N1, cin N1, do the same for N2. Second number, and this will be N2. And then, let's go to the function implementation. So you have the process. So in here, we need to declare here our variable high because that will be the storage for the highest number between N1 and N2. So if N1 is greater than N2, so this is just similar solution. It's just that you need to know the proper placement of the input, process, and output. So here, high will have the value of N1 and then C out. Highest number entered. So we'll just copy this so that they will have a uniform message. Highest number entered is high. Then copy this. It will be else if N2 greater than N1. If not, the two numbers are equal. So I'm finished with the declaration. I'm finished with the function body. I place inside the user-defined function the process and the output. And then the input is in main according to our table or our lecture presentation. The last thing that I need to do is to call the function. Now, to call this function, we need to have something inside the parentheses. As I've said, in this case, it will be N1 and N2. So, what happened in here is that, so let us try to run this. So, it's not highest, it is, we name it as highest 2. Okay, so let's try to run it. This is what will happen. So, when you run the code, and I press 2, it will go to case 2. And then inside the case 2, the first statement executed is input the first number, which is this case. So, I will input 4. And then, it will execute the second line, which is input second number. So, I will input 3, for example. So, what will happen with the value of 4 and 3 is what will happen with the value of 4 and 3, it will be passed. So, this value N1, 4, and the value of N2 is 3. The 4 and 3 will now be passed to the function body. So, the 4 and 3 will be passed to this parameter. So, N1 here will now be equal to 4, and N2 here will now be equal to 3. And then that 4 and 3 will now be processed inside that function body, and then whatever condition is satisfied, that will be the output of our program. So, enter. And then the highest number entered is equal to 4. Okay? So, this is what you need to understand here. Let's go back to the lecture material. So, the first thing that I want to discuss right now is what we call the local variable. So, what is a local variable? A variable that is given a local scope. A local variable references in the function or block in which it is declared. It overrides the same variable name. Sorry. So, I'm sorry, I was preempted with the battery low display. So, let us continue. Local variable is a variable that is given a local scope. So, let's go back in our code. So, what is a local variable? Any variable, so let's start with main. Any variable declared inside a function is what you call a local variable. In this case, variable choice N1 and 2 replay is a local variable in the scope of the main function. So here, we have another function, in this case, user-defined function. So the variable N1, N2, and high is a local variable in the scope of the highest function. And lastly, high is a local variable in the scope of highest 2. So let's say, for example, all those variable is a person. So let's say this choice N1, N2, and replace a person. So choice N1 and N2 and replay, their family name will be under main. And then, if this is a person, N1, N2, and high, their family name will be highest. Therefore, N1 and N2 here, and N1 and N2 in your main are two different instances of your variable. They are not the same. They only have the same name, but in the scope, they are residing in two different memory location. So, N1 and N2 here is different from N1 and N2 that is declared inside your user-defined function. Take note of that. So, anything that is declared inside your function is what you call a local variable. So, in this code, we only have what we call a local variable. Okay? Then, the next thing that we need to do is make some revision in our code. So, let us have this concept. Function overloading. So, what is a function overloading? Function overloading is usually used to enhance the readability of the program. Different ways to overload a function. Number one, by changing number of arguments. Arguments is the same as parameter. And number two, by having different types of argument. So, let us have the example for function overloading. So, I will edit it now. As you can see, we have declared two user-defined function, highest and highest2. But they are doing the same thing. They are determining the highest number. So, if this function are doing the same thing, why is that they have different name? In C++, it allows you to use the same name as long as we will follow the rule of function overloading. So as I've said, what is a function overloading? Their function now will have the same name, but number one, you need to make the argument different. So in this first user-defined function, you don't have any parameter or argument, and then you overload it. This time, it now has parameter. Therefore, it passes with the rule of function overloading. Without parameter, and then you make it with parameter, therefore, it will now be a function overloading. So, I will just put some comment here. Overloading, change the number of arguments or parameters. Okay? So, in this case, initially, we don't have any parameter for the function highest. And in the overloaded function, we put two parameter in the overloaded function. So, it has an underline here because we need to change it from here also. So, we don't have any highest 2 now. So, remove highest 2. Remove highest here. Okay? So, what will happen is that if you press choice number 1, it will still perform user-defined function without return type and without passing parameter. And then, if you choose function number 2, it will perform the overloaded function with the same name highest, but it accepts 2 parameters. Okay? So, that is function overloading. Same name of the function, but you change the number of parameter or argument. Okay? Then, the next thing that we need to identify or to change in this code is the use of global variable. So, you already know what is a local variable. Any variable inside the function is what you call a local variable. Now, what is a global variable? Global variables are variables whose content can be accessed anywhere in the program. So, in terms of scope or lifespan, global variable has a larger scope or lifespan as compared to local variable. So, how will I make my variable as a global variable? This is where you will decide. So, let us review the code. So, in function main, we have the following variable. N1, N2, choice, and replay. And then let us check the other function. In function highest, you have the following variable. N1, N2, and high. And in the overloaded function, you have the variable high. Now, how do I make my variable global? You will decide if the variable is repeatedly used inside a function, you need to declare it as a global variable. In this case, as what we have checked, N1 and N2 is used in main as well as in highest. Instead of declaring it individually inside your function, we will remove it from there. And instead, we will declare it as a global variable. So, global variable is declared outside of any function. So, we will declare here our N1 and N2. So, take note to remove it in your function. So, same thing with high. I will remove it there because it will be repeatedly used in the function. So, instead of repeatedly declaring it, I will make it as a global variable. Okay. So, let's add high here. So, when you run this code, it will still give you the same output, but we have applied different concepts now. So, 1, 4 and 3, correct. 2, 67 and 12, correct. Okay? So, before I end this presentation, let us just have a review. So, in this presentation, we have used function declaration without return type and with passing parameter. In without return type and with passing parameter, your input now is in main. So, that's the input. So, I will just add here a comment. The process and the output will remain inside your user-defined function. Next is the use of function overloading. Now, we use function overloading so that we will have the same name for the function. We only edit the number of parameters. And then lastly, we have used global variable for variable that you repeatedly use inside a function. Instead of declaring it individually, you just need to put here the declaration as a global variable. So that's it for this presentation. We will just continue with the next solution for with return type and without passing parameter.